Welcome to the Sociopath Mother-in-Law Next Door Diaries. Firstly, the reason that I'm resorting to keeping a diary or a vlog or a blog, whatever you want to call it, of my experiences is quite simply because things have become so difficult that I feel that it's a last resort. I really am at the point where the emotional roller coaster, the uncertainty of life living with sociopathic mother-in-law, the uncertainty is now getting to the point where it's just causing constant anxiety, frustration and anger. Obviously, as the stories I tell, the story as time goes on, that'll become more clear why I feel this way. The label sociopath is classed as an old-fashioned label. Firstly, I'm not any sort of doctor, and I'm not making a factual claim that she is a sociopath. It's just based on my experiences, interactions, and her behaviours. That is in my opinion, my honestly held opinion, that is the closest diagnosis that one can give, as in a lay person can give, to understand why someone behaves the way they do. It's helpful to at least try and figure out what they are in terms of, mental diagnosis, in order to try and understand why they behave the way they do, but also how to protect yourself in the future, almost trying to predict their behaviours, because if you can predict their behaviours, then you can prepare yourself. So that's the reason for this diary. I can't burden my wife with this any longer. Not that she doesn't feel differently to me about the situation. She just deals with it differently to me. She's more capable of dealing with it. I'm struggling to deal with it. And that's the difference between us. It's not that we disagree. We're just two very different individuals in terms of how we deal with abuse, which is what it is. Obviously, she's got a different relationship with the sociopath mother-in-law next door. There is no blood bond between me and her, obviously, and I've got to be very, very respectful and mindful of the fact that it's her mother. But yeah, that's what I'm hoping to achieve from this, is just to get a bit of therapy, a bit of relief, a bit of release, maybe some feedback, knowing that if other people agree with you, it helps you process what's going on and gives you confidence that you're not actually going mad yourself, which is what these people can make you feel like. I was walking through my village, talking to myself as I passed some people there. I think people already all think I'm going mad. So, obviously to start off the diaries, I'm going to give some background to the key characters, because what I want to do is make sure that it's clear who the characters are, a little bit about them, and that will help if anybody wants to put their opinion across in comments, then at least they might understand who the characters are, and that will give them a better sort of put them in a better position to be able to comment and have an opinion. And I can only give my word that everything I say will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. When it's opinion, I'll make that clear, and I will be given both sides of the story, i.e. I won't be holding anything back to make it sound like I'm right, warts and all. That's what I'm trying to say. Obviously I'm not perfect, I make mistakes, and when I've made a mistake along the way, I'll make sure I point that out. So I would just sort of cover that up. So background. So start with me. Obviously, if I'm going to be sharing information, personal information, I've got to be willing to give some of my personal information across as well, to try and build an understanding of what makes me tick. And obviously I will be changing the names of the guilty, changing the names to protect the guilty. And any names that I assign to these characters, it's meant to be a representation of who they are in the story. Hopefully that'll become clear as I go along. So myself, so I was born 49 years ago. I was adopted, given up for adoption. I didn't bond with my natural mother at all. Came straight out into this world and was immediately discarded by my natural mother. What a great start to life. That obviously, I wonder about that for 49 years, or however long I've been aware of it, since I was about 6 or 7, I guess. I wonder about what emotional trauma, what that sort of emotional trauma would have had on a baby, and the scars which potentially are there, and how it's moulded us into the person I am today. Being discarded at birth, which is I suppose, it's not really a coping mechanism. Well, it might be, to just make light of it. But I'm deeply, deeply aware of how that might have had an impact on me as a baby, being discarded, which is the message. And just because I was a baby, babies, they're still fully aware, in terms of, maybe aware is the wrong word, these things still have effects on a baby, just because they've got no memory and they can't process, their brains obviously can't process anything yet, really, but they obviously know who their mother is, and they know that that's mum and that's where I'm safe. Mum's going to look after us. I can rely on mum, me mum. This poor baby was just discarded, put to one side, and then passed from pillar to post for the next 2 years. I've got no idea what happened in those 2 years, none whatsoever, because obviously I've got no memory. For those 2 years, I know I was passed around foster parents, and potentially, I don't know, how can I put it, potentially abused. I've got no evidence of that. Well, there could be evidence of that, let's put it that way. That's all I'm going to say on that. And then when I was 2 and my adopted parents came to visit me at the foster home, this story which sticks in the memory. They turned up at the foster home to visit me, and this is, I was only 20 months old at this point. I was up at the bedroom window, standing up on the windowsill, completely unsupervised, and there was nobody in the house. I was left home alone at the age of 20 months, and I was standing on the bedroom windowsill. You could imagine my adopted parents' absolute shock and horror, the fact that this little baby or this toddler was home alone and had found themselves in that situation. I don't know if there was a window open, I don't know, I can't recall the story in that much detail, or whether or not that much detail was even given to us by my adopted mum. So anyway, again, completely, where's my foster parents? Abandoned again, discarded again. So this is a constant theme for the first 2 years of my life, that I keep on being abandoned, let down by my parents, or by people who are carers. And then I was adopted at the age of round about 2, and my adopted mother was, I can only say, a fantastic mother, and give me everything that I needed in terms of love, care, attention, emotional validation, nurturing, and was always there for us. Absolutely no complaints. We didn't have an awful lot of money, so you made do with just the necessities in life. 3 square meals, a roof over your head, and holes in your trainers. It was pretty much. It wasn't tough or anything. You just didn't even think about it. You just occasionally you saw other children that had the latest brand new trainers, but and you sometimes wish that you could have the same sort of material things, clothes, labels, but generally speaking, no, it didn't impact us. You appreciated things, you saved up for things, you learned to be patient and save up for things, given a money box, and taught all those sort of old-fashioned values, I suppose you would say they are now. At the age of about 6, I started asking my mum and dad, obviously this is from now on my adopted mum and dad, I started asking them, or emotionally blackmailing them to get a brother. And obviously at this point I understood that this is just one, going back to my mother briefly, I think she had multiple miscarriages as well. So obviously when she adopted me, it was gift from God, I suppose, in her eyes. So at the age of about 6, I started emotionally blackmailing, particularly my mum, into getting a brother, because my understanding at this point, remembering that, oh, there's a little rabbit on the floor. Oh, it doesn't look very well. Poor thing. Obviously, at this point, my understanding of the birds and the bees, where you just went to an office and ordered a toddler, because obviously I'd been told that I was adopted and all the rest of it. So it was as simple as that. Can I have a brother, please? Can I order a brother? And anyway, my parents, I don't know if I planted that seed or whether it was already a seed that was planted in their heads. I don't know. But one way or another, along came the brother. And long story short, my brother turned out to be a complete wrong'un. He clearly had some sort of issues right from the get-go. Constant crying. Again, he's gone through the same similar traumas as myself, and maybe it's affected him differently. Comes from different stock, obviously. Who knows what impact that has had, but clearly something was wrong. But very as he started to go to school, very clever, like intellectually, not emotionally. No emotional intelligence, but quite intellectual. So as time went on, he became more and more off the rails, and then he became what I can only describe as a bit of a guinea pig for I guess I just have to say it, for the pharmaceutical industry, because he was diagnosed with ADHD, or just ADD as it was at the time, and given all sorts of medication. This is once he got to maybe his early teens, given all sorts of medication, and his behaviour never improved, to the point where once he got to a certain age, in his mid-teens, he became, mid-teens, early to mid-teens, he became physically, both emotionally and physically abusive towards my mother, which, as you can imagine, was particularly difficult for me to deal with. As he got older again, a little bit older again, he would obviously then become quite, intimidating towards my dad, because obviously he's now turned into a young man. So physically intimidating, but not intimidating to me. And like all bullies, as soon as you stand up to him, he'd run away. And it got to the point where, so I would have to witness him being abusive towards my mum, and I would want to intervene as a protector. And my dad would not allow me to intervene, and he would always want to do things without violence, which is on one hand admirable, but on the other hand, if you're going to lay a hand on my mother, then I'm going to knock you out, and that's my right to do that. self-defense. I'm allowed to step in, and I don't mean the law of the land, I just mean morally. That's your duty, to protect a vulnerable woman who's also your mother, to protect them from a violent thug. So you can imagine what this was doing to us as a youngster, a young man in the mid to late teens, going through obviously all of the changes that you go through at that age. My dad always tried to deal with it amicably, which is completely pointless when you're dealing with somebody who has zero empathy. And whenever I tried to intervene, I would get disciplined. Literally, I would get disciplined. And this was back in the day where, so this is in the 80s, mid to late 80s. And this is a time when parents, if you could call them that, obviously I don't mean my mum, I mean my dad. This is during a time where parents thought it was perfectly normal to hit their children when they thought they needed discipline, and that happened to me. So it was smacking you on the backside, and believe me, they believed that this was the numbest part of your body, and that therefore they had the right to physically attack you if they believed you needed discipline. And believe me, there was no mistaking. I was in no doubt that he put every effort and every amount of physical force into those beatings. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what that is. It's physical abuse. You do not have the right to physically beat your children. So whether or not I was being disciplined for coming home late, or whether or not I was being disciplined for trying to protect my mother by threatening my brother with physical force if he didn't stop, whether I was getting disciplined for either of those two things, the message was the same. Just being completely let down by your parent, by your father figure. Again, the message was, so this is the message that I remember it clearly, this is the message that I processed at that age, that he doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know the difference between right and wrong, and he doesn't understand the emotional, psychological trauma that's being forced upon me, which it is being forced upon me, the psychological trauma that's being forced upon me through his ignorance. But there was no understanding, there was no compassion, there was no empathy for me. I was just told with no doubt whatsoever that I am not to get involved. So can you imagine watching, and this wasn't every day, but it was regular, watching your mother be abused by your brother, and whether it's emotionally or whether it's with physical threats of physical violence or actual physical violence. Imagine watching that every day and not being able to help. So that's a little bit about my background in early childhood, and I think this is what I think, looking at my own personality and characteristics and behaviours. I think what all of that has taught me is that you can't trust. Well, you can trust. You don't need to trust anybody when it comes to the difference between right and wrong. I'm going to stand on my own 2 feet. I know the difference between right and wrong. I've never had to rely on anybody because everybody's abandoned us. So I've become very self-reliant and independent. But it's also given me a desire to want to help. Deep down inside the man is the little boy who just wants to help. And also deep down inside the man is the little boy who just wants a father figure. Just wants somebody to put their arm around him and say, well done, son, proud of you. So that's what I'm going to take away from my background, is that I stand on my own 2 feet. I know the difference between right and wrong, and there's no way I'm not going to act when I see something wrong happening, whatever that is. If it's wrong, I'm intervening. But equally, if somebody's a good person, if I see a good person, then I want to help. I want to help in any way I can. And those behaviours have definitely come out in me in my adult life. I really enjoy helping people, and I've got a very strong sense of right and wrong, and I cannot let wrongdoings go unnoticed. And whatever the consequences, because it's the consequences of not intervening is what I was forced to deal with when I was a young man. I was forced to not intervene, and I saw the consequences. My mum ended up with dementia, and at a fairly early stage, and ultimately she ended up in a care home. And you only last a couple of years once you go into one of those places. You put on end of life treatments, and once you put on end of life treatments, you don't last long. And that was her decline. And the way I see that, obviously this is only opinion. I don't know what caused her dementia, but I'm going to suggest that the terrible life that she had with my brother, and I mean terrible, had an impact on her one way or another. And so it won't come as any surprises to you that I don't have anything to do with him. He's also got a criminal record. Some of his crimes include underage children, people who aren't classed as adults, shall we say. So he probably was he probably was abused himself at some point before his adoption. I'm gonna suggest that. But obviously you can imagine the life that she had dealing with the chaos. But I also blame my adopted father for not protecting her. I would have protected her. And I don't think he doesn't realise to this day what part he played in the decline of my mother's well-being. He clearly got all of this wrong. So I think I've painted the picture of him as, a bit authoritarian. Went out to work every day, stable job, never moved house, never evolved. In other words, just same every day. So yeah, as a child you get stability, but you need your parents to help you grow as well, and I don't just mean physically, I mean mentally and emotionally. And I certainly didn't get any of that from him. But luckily I did from my mother. Just quickly going back to my brother being a lab rat for the pharmaceutical industry, because during that period was when these sorts of labels were being attributed to people's behaviour, and it was, it was an experiment basically. Let's take this drug, because this was all a new thing, or fairly new, back in the early 80s. Try this, doesn't work. Try that, doesn't work. Try the other, doesn't work. Try this, doesn't work. Just made it worse. But every single time my parents went to the doctors for help, they had such trust in the system. They just assumed it was going to work, because they were just totally naive and totally ignorant. And every single time they went, they were just being fed hope. They trusted the system, they trusted the doctors, and they just came away thinking, right, that's going to work. Let's hope it does. And they just got addicted to hope. And then they probably didn't realise what on earth, what are the actual impacts on that young boy. And the reason I say naive and ignorant was because even, let's just say I was 11 at that time when he was first given the label. I couldn't process the idea that he's been given an excuse to behave the way he did, because that's what it is. When he was given this label, it was an excuse. Everybody, in terms of the four of us, everybody now knows it's not his fault. It's a disorder. The idea that this is maybe something that's just he's been born with. Nothing you can do about it. I couldn't deal with that. That wasn't right to me. And given medication, even as an 11-year-old, I guess what I'm trying to say is I kind of had this intuition that it wasn't going to work, and it's a waste of time, and I was completely right. And I remember I used to say that he hasn't got a medical problem, and this is controversial, but there is plenty of evidence out there to support this. Even though I was 11-year-old, I didn't know any of that. It was just pure intuition. I would say he hasn't got a medical condition. He's just an arsehole. That was the only way I could express my feelings, with my limited vocabulary that I had at the time. He hasn't got an illness, he's just an arsehole. And as far as I'm concerned, there's evidence out there to support it, that at the end of the day he can be fixed through other methods. He's just an arsehole. Giving him drugs isn't going to fix the root cause, which probably comes from trauma. That's my belief, but anyway, that's not what this podcast is about. So anyway, again, just to summarise my character, I've obviously gone through a fairly tough upbringing, and due to my experiences, I stand on my own 2 feet. I know the difference between right and wrong. I've got a desire to help people, and I can't let an injustice go unnoticed. So that's me. On to character number 2, who, for the purpose of this diary, I'm going to refer to my wife as the beacon of light. So she came into this world 49 years ago, and she had a stable upbringing up until the age of 6, at which point her mum and dad split up and then divorced, which caused obviously a lot of trauma for her and her sister. Her sister would have been 4, and at the age of 6, so she would have been 6 or 7 by the time, obviously all of this was sort of over with, the whole divorce period, or coming to terms with the fact that her dad wasn't going to be there anymore. I'm saying 6, but I'm pretty sure that she wouldn't have been told straight away. Dad doesn't just leave the house and the mother goes upstairs and tells the kids that the dad's left. I'm pretty sure that didn't happen, and doesn't happen in most cases. So I'm going to suggest she was probably closer at 7 by the time she learned what was actually going on. And so for 7 years she had a stable upbringing, and she has good memories of her mum and dad, in terms of when when they were together. And it takes a lot of your programming and your learning in terms of your environment is cemented in the first 7 years. So most of your behaviours, most of who you are, is programmed into you in the first 7 years. So if you have a very, very, very steady, stable, loving environment with mum and dad, and all of your needs are catered for, physical and emotional, then you'll more than likely at that point you'll have developed into a very stable, balanced child. Obviously there's still a hell of a lot more development to be done, mentally and physically, but obviously what I'm saying is those 7 years are vital. So when she learned as a 6 or 7 year old, when she learned of what had happened, she said to her mum, and she's never forgotten this, the important things stick, don't they? She said to her mum, "Don't worry, I'm the dad now, And so she took on the responsibility of the father figure, and I mean, obviously she didn't in reality, but in her little mind, she was shown a huge amount of empathy, understanding, and compassion for her mum, and that is probably sums up her as a person today, as a woman today, independent, strong, high in empathy, high in emotional intelligence, wants to help everybody, wants to be the protector, like a father figure, wants to do as much as she can to make sure everybody else is happy, but not, and this is important, not at the cost of our own happiness. And she certainly doesn't suffer fools, and she doesn't take any BS. So she's a very, very, very balanced, independent, strong woman who's got, but not cold, not hard, not guarded, strong, but still a beautiful soul, with all of the fully functioning and regulation of her emotions, very, very balanced. After her father walked out for another woman, or so we're led to believe, but as this story goes on, you'll realise that I'm not sure I believe anybody. So we're led to believe that he walked out for another woman. Somebody's lying, because the story from one side and the other are complete opposite. But as you'll discover, there are no truth tellers outside of the two main characters in this story. So after our father walked out, I don't know, maybe a couple of years of my mother being a single mum, and the struggles that go with that. This is back in the early 80s. The beacon had to again stand on her own 2 feet, become independent a lot quicker than most children. Her mum was always at work, didn't have much money, similar to me, didn't have much money, so had to save money and buy things, once you've done the hard work. And generally speaking, there wasn't often a parent figure in the house because the mother was out at work. This is back in the day when it wasn't typical for a mother to work full time. Then her mother met what then became her stepdad, and they moved in with him, and for the next few years there wasn't much stability. Moved house 1 to at least 3 times by the time she was 16, 17. And I mean, that's not too bad, but there's not much stability there. And her relationship, certainly her early relationship with her stepdad, was just constant arguing, but just over petty things like having not done the dishes, or putting just one plate in the dishwasher, or being on the telephone for too long to her friends. But it would turn into an actual argument where, shouting. And I think that just shows another side of her personality. She'd much prefer not to end up in a shouting match, and that is very, very, very rare that she does that. But in a household where you've got this new father figure and she's the dad in her mind, who do you think you're talking to? Standing up for herself, in other words. Yeah, standing up for herself. She's not a walkover, never has been, never will be. So I think, again, that says a lot about her character and where it's come from. Over time, she developed a more of a respectful relationship with her stepdad. Probably as she got older, she became a bit more aware that, maybe putting one dish in the dishwasher and turning it on is a bit of a waste. I think that's common sense. Teenagers, tend to not have much common sense. So as she got a bit older and a bit wiser, she obviously just started, doing things that, adults would expect other young adults to do. And that obviously meant that the relationship settled down, and it became a bit more respectful. But I think the arguing, and she said this herself, I think the arguing helped create respect, because they both realised that the other doesn't take any BS. Whatever you want to say about the nature of the arguments doesn't really matter, I don't think. It created mutual respect, and then that respect was the foundation to move forwards, and it became very, very close. And good banter between them, good camaraderie. Take the mick out of each other and just have a laugh. And at the end of the day, the Beacon, when she married me, she asked her stepfather to share the duty of giving her away. She didn't have a father on each arm. What she did was she got her stepdad to bring her down the stairs from her bedroom, all dressed up. She came down the stairs with her stepdad, and then at the bottom of the stairs, the entrance to the hallway of where we were getting married, he sort of handed her over to her natural dad. So he was involved, in other words. Big part. So they had a real strong bond, and that's important to remember when I get to latter parts of the story, is that bond and how strong it was and how much I loved him. So as far as the Beacon is concerned, strong, independent, compassionate, full of empathy, full of emotional intelligence, loving, caring, wants to do right by everybody. And so again, you'll notice what we've got in common. We want to do the right thing. Doesn't suffer fools, doesn't take any BS, and she'll stand up for herself. But she's got a really beautiful soul, and she's got her own emotions, which she's fully in tune with, and she's not some sort of iron woman who you can just constantly knock down, and she keeps getting up. She will get up eventually, but it's going to impact her, and she is very, very resilient. But if she gets knocked down, so many times by the same person, in terms of being let down, she's resilient, but don't expect her to come back to you if you're the person that's knocked her down or wronged her. doesn't suffer fools. So I think I hope I've explained the beacon and myself. I hope I've done a good job, and that you can maybe see how we really, really, really work together. So when did we meet? So I met the beacon 33 years ago when I was just 16, knew nothing. And I met her on New Year's Eve, sometime between 11 o'clock and midnight on New Year's Eve at the local rugby club. And, as the story goes, our eyes met across the dance floor and the rest is history. I could go on and on and on about that story, but it's not what this diary is about. So anyway, we met when we were just 16, and we just connected straight away. Kind of knew that it was she was my soulmate, and vice versa. She went to university, ended up going on to college, and then on to university, studying law, and I ended up dropping out of sixth form and getting a job, just a basic YTS, they were called, youth training scheme, a job where you're paid very, very little, but you're supposed to get some sort of qualifications alongside it. But anyway, so we went down very, very different paths in that sense. But we've been through so much. We've been from the age of 16. We've been through. I mean, you're not even a fully developed, mentally, psychologically, emotionally developed adult yet. That doesn't happen until about after 20. Until you're about 25 on average. So we've gone through the coming of age period, going through university, getting jobs, learning how to drive, ups and downs, working out finances and how the hell you cope with money when you eventually do start earning, how to buy a house. The whole range of experiences have been done with this beacon of light, and it hasn't been, nobody's relationship is perfect, but in the main, she's just the most amazing woman I could possibly want to meet. Hugely influential, supportive and caring woman. Fast forward, because I don't think we need that much of this part of the story. Fast forward to now, we have a 14-year-old daughter who is just, obviously we worship the ground she walks on, but she seems to be turning into a very, very thoughtful young woman young lady, whatever you call a 14-year-old. Don't want to call them a child. She's not a child as far as I'm concerned. Obviously she's still got a lot of growing to do and a lot of learning, but she's very, very, very aware. She's very, very, very emotionally mature, very responsible, and she's got an awful lot of empathy. So all is good on that front. So we've got a 14-year-old. We've got a really, really nice, quiet life. We both work full time. She works in HR now. She's a HR business partner, and I work, probably rather not say what I do for a living. Let's just say I'm a civil servant. But I've done all right within that career. We've both got a nice, let's just say, fairly comfortable lifestyle. We don't have any expensive tastes. Expensive tastes as in the type of tastes where you've got to question whether people have got more money than sense. We have a very simple lifestyle, and we really, really, really value, our home, our privacy, and just the simple things in life, like going camping or going walking, being out in nature. So that's us. So on to the main person, the main character of the story. It's the mother-in-law who, for the purpose of the story, I'm going to call the Husk. And the reason I'm going to call her the Husk is because if you look at her backstory, I think she's created such a guarded persona, which resembles a husk, that there is nothing left inside of any worth. And that might sound harsh. That's somebody's mother I'm talking about. But that is the conclusion I've come to. And when I say worth, I mean, any emotional intelligence, the capability of showing love and affection to your daughter, to be able to see when you're wrong, admit it when you're wrong, take responsibility, move forward, and evolve as a person, and actually recognise the difference between right and wrong, and do the best for your family and ultimately yourself. I think all of that's gone. I think all of that's dead, doesn't exist. And I think all that you're left with is a physical body going through the motions. That doesn't sound like an experience I would want. It doesn't sound like an experience that's going to give you the full range of the human experience. And just the husk of a person, cold, bitter, selfish, impulsive, mean, cruel, no emotional support given to our daughter, which is something the Beacon has actually said. Never was cuddled, hugged. Certainly as a daughter starts to get to an age where they can stand on their own 2 feet, and I mean physically, maybe a bit older than that, just never got hugs, never got true affection. And I think some of the stories that'll come along in this diary, you'll realise that is, still the case today.